by Natty. After my recent breakup, I had no choice but to move back in with my family. My ex and I had been living together in Boston, but if there's one piece of advice I can give, it's never sign a lease with someone you've just started dating. He turned out to be a different person than I expected. My parents live in Western Massachusetts, which, if you've been here, you'd know becomes more rural the further west you go. I'm not exactly a country girl. I'd rather be near a major city, especially in my 20s. My parents' area is incredibly boring, and I hope this is just a temporary stay until I can find another apartment I can afford on my own. Although, I won't be heading back to Boston for reasons I'd rather not get into. I got a job at an urgent care center I worked at before moving, and they were happy to have me back, even if it's only temporary. The downside to the job is that I work undesirable hours, usually overnight shifts. While the shifts are easy, they mess up my sleep schedule and social life. Not that my social life is great around here anyway. Sometimes after my shifts, I'll stop for dinner. There's not much open at those hours, but this morning, I got out at 4 a.m. and decided to stop by a bagel place that opens early. I picked up a chicken sandwich and a salad and was planning to eat it once I got home. I also needed to fill up my car, so I stopped by a local Shell station. It's a huge parking lot, but I rarely see any cars there, even during the day. I went inside to pay with cash, then headed back to my pump. A blue sedan pulled up to the pump next to me, and a man got out. As I started fueling my car, I noticed he was fueling up too. He did that trick where you pretend to pull your finger off and kept staring at me with this smug look. I wasn't interested, but I faked a laugh to end the interaction. He didn't stop though. When I finally finished fueling, I rushed inside to grab my change. When I came back outside, his car was still there and the pump was still dispensing gas into his vehicle. Feeling uneasy, I checked my back seat, just to be sure no one was hiding there, locked the doors, and quickly drove home. Once I got there, I unlocked the spare key and rushed inside. I was relieved to finally sit down and eat my 4:30 a.m. dinner, but as I was sitting down, I heard the front door open and close. I froze, trying to listen. I called out for my parents, but there was no response. I rushed upstairs to my parents' room and found them both asleep. My dad quickly got up and went downstairs to investigate. When he noticed the spare key was missing, panic set in. My mom started scolding me for not being more careful. My dad checked every room in the house, and I stayed behind in my brother's room, checking the areas he missed. When I went downstairs to check the dining room, I got on my knees and looked under the table, and there he was, the man from the gas station, hiding under the table. I screamed, and my mom screamed too. My dad came running up, and the man tried to fight him off. Eventually, all three of us managed to chase him out. We called the cops, who responded quickly. Thankfully, that night they kept a patrol car in front of our house, and my dad changed the lock on the front door the next day. I feel guilty for unintentionally putting my parents at risk, and it was my fault for being careless. However, I believe the man must have been following me, as I didn't see any cars behind me on the way home. I'm just glad my family is safe, but now I feel even more determined to move out of here. By Mike Crowley. I prefer driving at night because nothing bothers me more than traffic. I'm from Long Island, New York, and the traffic here is unbearable. My brother lives in Florida, and I visit him frequently. The drive takes about 18 hours, so I leave early to avoid the congestion. On a Thursday morning at 2 a.m., I left to start my journey, grabbing coffee at Dunkin' Donuts for the long drive ahead. The drive from New York to Florida is fairly straightforward once you're out of New York. By 4 a.m., I started feeling hungry, so I took the first exit off I-95 that had a food sign. I ended up at a Wendy's thinking I could grab breakfast. It was a secluded area, and the Wendy's parking lot was dimly lit. But there was one other car parked there. I pulled into the drive-thru, but the intercom was silent. And after a minute of waiting, I realized they didn't open until 6 a.m. Suddenly, 3 knocks on my window startled me. I turned to see a man outside, smiling. He motioned for me to roll down my window, which I did reluctantly. He explained that his car had broken down and asked for help jump-starting it. He assured me he had jumper cables in his trunk. I agreed to help, believing in karma, and parked next to his car to give him access to the engine. We connected the jumper cables, and after a couple of attempts, his car still wouldn't start. He seemed a little frustrated, then made a call and spoke in Spanish. I couldn't understand much of what he was saying, but when he returned, he suggested waiting a little longer and trying again. I agreed, but then I heard the engines of 2 pickup trucks speeding into the lot. I realized something wasn't right. The 2 trucks pulled up behind my car, trapping me. The man's smile had turned into something more sinister. I locked my car and bolted into the woods, cutting myself on branches and tripping over unseen obstacles. I hid as I heard men shouting in Spanish. My heart was racing, not knowing how many there were or if they were armed. Thankfully, the voices began fading as they searched, and I thought I was safe. When the sounds died down, I cautiously returned to the parking lot to find my car and belongings gone. My rear window had been shattered, and nearly all of my things were stolen. My suitcase, clothes, watches, and other valuables were gone. I was overwhelmed and in shock. I called the police, but when they reviewed the CCTV footage, they told me the vehicle had a fake license plate and the pickup trucks didn't have plates. They promised to do their best, but I knew there was little they could do. It was a long, stressful drive home. By Mike Crowley. I enjoy driving at night because it helps me avoid the unbearable traffic I deal with in Long Island, New York. My brother lives in Florida, so I make frequent trips down there. The drive is long, usually taking about 18 hours, but I prefer leaving early, around 2 a.m., to miss all the busy traffic. On one Thursday morning, I began my journey at 2 a.m., stopping for coffee at Dunkin' Donuts before hitting the road. I prefer driving myself rather than flying, as I'd be staying for a month, and didn't want to rely on my brother for transportation. By 4 a.m., I was feeling hungry, so I exited the I-95 highway and spotted a Wendy's. I had skipped breakfast, figuring I wouldn't be hungry for a while, but by this point, I needed something. The Wendy's was in a quiet, isolated part of Jersey, with no streetlights. As I pulled into the drive-thru, I saw a car parked in the lot, and the drive-thru menu was lit up, suggesting it was open. But no one answered my order for over a minute. I even tried calling out, "Excuse me," but still nothing. I checked my phone and realized the Wendy's didn't open until 6 a.m. Just as I was about to leave, I heard 3 loud knocks on my window that nearly made me jump out of my seat. I turned and saw a man smiling at me, signaling for me to roll down my window. I wasn't comfortable with the idea, but I cracked it open just enough to hear him. He told me that the place wasn't open yet and pointed to another car, saying his battery had died and asking if I could help him jump-start it. I wasn't keen on getting involved, but he insisted that he had jumper cables in his trunk. He moved away so I could pull my car next to his, and once I did, we got the jumper cables out and hooked them up. We waited a bit, but when he tried starting his car, nothing happened. I found it odd, since he had just been driving the car, but he didn't seem bothered. The man then made a phone call in low tones, speaking Spanish. He came back and said his friend suggested waiting a bit longer and trying again. At this point, I was starting to feel uneasy but still hoped this would wrap up soon. Suddenly, I heard the unmistakable sound of 2 pickup trucks revving their engines as they sped into the parking lot from opposite sides. My gut immediately told me something was wrong. I quickly disconnected the jumper cables and slammed the hood shut. Before I could react, the trucks had trapped me in. I locked my car and made a run for it, heading straight for the woods. I tripped on something in the dark, but stayed low, hiding as best as I could. I could hear voices yelling in Spanish nearby, and my heart was pounding in my chest. The voices started fading, and I felt a sense of relief until I heard my car alarm go off. I slowly made my way back to the parking lot, and when I peeked out, I saw that the other vehicles were gone, but my car was still there. However, my rear window had been shattered, and nearly everything in my car was stolen. Clothes, shoes, watches, even my suitcase. I was devastated and, honestly, in shock. I called the police, who arrived and took all my details. They said they'd retrieved the CCTV footage from Wendy's once they opened. I was too far from home to stick around, so I headed back. But it was clear I'd lost most of my things. It was a rough end to what should have been a simple trip.